Chapter 4. Oh, that Delphine gave me a hard night. I tossed and turned, still seeing her come down the plank in all her New Orleans finery, like a visitor from the moon. It wasn't every day in the week that we had company in our spare room. They'd seemed to expect a candle, so we gave them one. I thrashed in the bed, wondering if they'd burn down the house. I was so restless that even Cass, who slept in the trundle at the foot of my bed, reared up to see what ailed me. And Cass could sleep through earthquake, famine, and flood, another of her peculiarities. Just before dawn, Mama nearly scared me into a fit by coming in the room and looming over my bed. Her hair, let down, swept my face, just as I'd been dreaming of lace and gauzy silk. "Listen to me," Mama whispered. "I don't dare to talk out loud." She jerked her head to the wall between our room and the room where Delphine and Calinda were. "I don't know what to make of them two," said Mama. "Be real careful what you say around them. Watch every word. I think that Calinda might be a slave, and I wonder if that Delphine knows which side of the river they's on. Don't explain a thing, even if asked." She gave the corner of my quilt a twitch to make sure I attended every whispered word. I nodded in the night. A law in the books said that black people weren't allowed into Illinois. We'd paid no attention to that, of course. There were plenty of black people in the state, and they were all free. Mama melted away. As quick as she was out in the hall, she let forth a shriek to wake the dead. Through the crack in the door, I saw she'd walked straight into Calinda. In the gloom, the tails of her bandana stood up like perky ears. She was dressed for the day, evidently. Then I heard Mama say, "Oh, well, yes, there's plenty of hot water for washing yourselves." The two of them went off downstairs to the kitchen fire. Once more, Cass reared up in the trundle and blinked around in the dark. I may have dozed because the next thing I remember is daylight in the kitchen. Mama and I bustled. Today we had guests, and paying ones at that. Besides, Mama liked things done right, poor though we were. She'd come from up around Vandalia when it was the capital of the state. She knew how things ought to be, so we got out a cloth for the table, a blue and white checked, much darned and patched. I laid the table. Mama was frying scrapple and 2 eggs apiece for us all, like Christmas morning. We couldn't afford coffee, but she brewed up a big pot of our sassafras tea. We dug the sassafras root out in the timber and dried the bark. Mama had sent Cass upstairs to say that breakfast was about on the table. Cass was no sooner there than she was back again. She shot into the kitchen like a pack of hounds was on her tail. Her mouth was stretched in a wordless scream, and she was as gray-faced as the ghost she often saw. She grabbed the edge of the table, then fetched up a breath and howled out, "The tall one's killing the short one!" Mama dropped the spatula and spun around, supposing that Cass had finally lost all her reason. "I'm telling you," Cass yelled, "Calinda's killing the little fancy one, and the little one's hurting bad." Hearing Cass at the top of her lungs brought Noah out from the room he slept in down here by the chimney. He was shaking off sleep and wondering who was being killed. "Cass, is this one of your visions?" I said, "or is it real?" She stamped a foot. "It's happening, Dad, burn it." Mama gave Cass a searching look. Then we all bolted out of the kitchen, along the hall, up the stairs. Cass was in the lead, and Noah brought up the rear. Mama stopped halfway up and turned on him. "Not you, boy. You go back. There might be nakedness this early in the day." The door to the spare room stood ajar. Of our 3 bedrooms upstairs, this was the best, looking out across to Tower Rock. We heard sighs and whimpers. Delphine was evidently still alive, if barely. Mama went forth, and we let her. She stalked into the spare room and pulled up short. "Oh, for the land's sake," she said, whipping around to turn us back. I was naturally all eyes and saw everything. Delphine stood, feet planted at the foot of the big old 4-poster bed. Both her hands grabbed the poster tight. Mama had been right to forbid Noah this sight. Delphine wore not a stitch but white cotton stockings, her drawers, and corsets. Behind her was Calinda, with one foot on the floor and the other foot in the small of Delphine's back. With both hands, Calinda was pulling tight the straining strings of the corsets, like the reins on a rearing horse. Straining and just about cutting poor gasping Delphine into to draw her corsets tight enough so you could span her waist with 2 hands. Now we were all out in the hall making tracks. As a rule, Mama went easy on Cass, but today she gave her ear a good wrenching. "Girl, I'd like to turn you every way but loose," she said. "She wasn't killing her. She was getting her into her corsets." "Well, I never seen nothing like it," Cass whined. "Neither had I, and I'd sooner be murdered than to have to wear a pair of them corset things. Mama, did you ever wear them?" "Once on the day I was married, and that was plenty. I passed out twice before I got to the altar." We were on the stairs now. Mercifully, neither Calinda nor Delphine had made note of us in their room. We hadn't lingered. Still, I was amazed at their clutter. Both trunks yawned, and the room was festooned with all manner of clothes, and I don't know what all. "They must have been calculating a long visit to St. Louis," I said. "If you ask me," Mama murmured, "them two don't add up." Noah stood by the kitchen fire with a mug of tea in his hand, as wide-eyed with wonder as he ever got. "No harm done," said Mama, "and nothing to concern you." Pointing him into Pa's chair, she straightened her apron and went back to the skillet. We sat to our breakfast, not knowing how long the corset business would last. While short, Delphine was not small. "Heavens above," I muttered, "does she go through that torture every morning of her life?" The Mama narrowed her eyes at me because Noah was sopping up every word. We'd set 2 places for our company. I don't know if you could call Mama abolitionist or not, but she took a very dim view of slavery and slave owners, and didn't care who knew it. In the state of Illinois, even this far south, Calinda would sit at the table like the rest of us. I wondered where she'd slept. There was but one big bed in the room. Did slaves sleep on the floor? Seemed like there wasn't room for a cat to nap with all their tangles strewn about. Then there they were at the door. Delphine was first. After my last glimpse of her, I couldn't believe this one. That was no more her natural waist than it was mine, but goodness, how tiny and dainty it was. Skirts flared below it, so wide she could hardly pass through the door. Above, she was hung with several fine shawls. She peered curiously into the room. We peered curiously back. Her skin was perfect, and there was powder on her face. You could see it. But she hadn't chanced paint here in the cold light of dawn. Her lips were pale. There were patches of a naturally violet color below her dark eyes. We saw her full face now, without her bonnet. How had Calinda managed her young lady's hair? The black curls hung long to frame her face. "Bonjour, mi ami," she remarked, and floated forth. Calinda followed. A white bandana wouldn't have made her face darker. This one was of a color we used to call guinea blue. White scarves crossed the top of her dress. She was as narrow-faced as Delphine was round. They had the same eyes, though Calinda's trusted no one. Mama looked at Noah, and he was suddenly on his feet. The chair fell over behind him. Cass and I were at the fire, bringing breakfast. Calinda settled beside Mama as if she expected to be there. That put Delphine next to Noah. He hadn't stood behind their chairs to seat them, as Mama pointed out to him later. Now he'd retrieved his chair. It was as well he was sitting again, because he was weak in the knees. We slid the plates before them. Mama had made a name for herself with her scrapple. It was cornmeal and shredded pork off the neck bones. You gelled this mess in a long pan and kept it in a cool place. Then you sliced out slabs of it to fry in lard. Today, Mama had used butter instead. I could eat my weight in scrapple. The eggs were done to a turn. I leaned in to pour brimming cups of sassafras tea. Calinda bent to sniff at her cup and flinched. Overlooking our eggs, Delphine said, "How good you are to take us in, orphans of the storm." Her smile was like sunup. Across from me, Calinda eyed the scrapple with dark suspicion. She poked at an egg with her fork. "I hope you slept," Mama remarked. Her face was damp from the fire. Seeing Delphine's hair, she just touched her own. Mais oui, madame," Delphine said. "We stuff petticoats around the windows. We wear our cloaks." Cass went goggle-eyed and surprised herself into speech. "'Tain't winter." "No, it was springtime. We slept with the windows wide open. On the other hand, we were still sewn into our winter underwear, and as we knew, Delphine, for one, wasn't. Her laugh tinkled like silver. Yet it is more winter than we know. I saw they were both still freezing. Tomorrow, I thought, I'll put them nearer to the fire to thaw them. That was the way with Delphine. You tried to think of ways to please her. I saw that on the first day. We weren't used to talk at the table, and the kitchen rang with hers. She babbled and bubbled like a wellspring, and told nothing. Her accent came and went. I looked back to the way life had been yesterday and couldn't find it. Dazzled though I was, I saw Calinda wasn't going near her breakfast. Delphine moved more victuals around her plate than she ate. The sparkle of her gaze played back and forth over us, always ending to linger on Noah. She saw how red his ears had gone. Who could miss them? They were on fire. He didn't chance a look at her, but he drank in every word. If she'd reached out and touched his wrist, he might have fallen forward in a faint. A scent came from her of some flower we didn't know. Noah swayed. Mama saw it and didn't like it. All men were what she called susceptible, and Noah thought he was a man already. Mama stepped in, so to speak. Won't your aunt up at St. Louis wonder what became of you? Calinda shot a quick sideways glance at Delphine, who answered at once, Tante Blanche? Of course, unless she is already murder in her bed. I write at once to say where we are. Now she did touch Noah's wrist. Where are we? Me, I know nothing. What is this place? Noah swallowed. All the territory this end of the state's called Egypt, and this here is Grand Tower. It thrives, this place? Noah rubbed his chin to make the point that he shaved. It's promising. He pitched his voice way down below his bootlaces. If we could get the railroad in here, we could load the boats with the coal coming out of Mount Carbon and Murfreesboro. A rail line could make us. Mike could bring in some industry. The railroad first reached the river up at Rock Island and made a considerable town of it. I fell back in the chair. That was the longest speech that ever come out of that boy's mouth. Was he running for office? But then Cass was chirpier too this morning. We were all changed overnight. Mama didn't draw a breath until Delphine's hand slipped back into her lap. Noah went on looking at his wrist where her fingers had been. And your folks down south, Mama pressed on, won't they fret over your whereabouts? Delphine started in her chair prettily. Maman! But naturally I must write her. Will the next boat take the letter? She will be beside herself until she knows we are safe. I wonder your mother didn't come with you since things are so unsettled down there. Mama was beginning to pry for sure. She is a brave, that one, Delphine said. If anyone dare besiege New Orleans, Clemence Duval will defend it with her last breath. Who will not? Let the enemy smell the gunpowder of Louis Hébert Pélican rifles. All that gold braid. You know what happened in that War of 1812 when les maudits Anglais tried to take New Orleans? They, how you say, skedaddle. She glanced at Pa's fowling piece hanging there above Noah's head. I had a quick picture of her mother up there on a levee with her skirts and her boots and a rifle butt in her shoulder, taking pot shots at us Yankees. Delphine turned over a tiny plump hand. But war may not come to us. New Orleans is the largest city of the South, perhaps the greatest in the world. It could strangle the North by blocking to ships the river's mouth. She nodded her fist and held it up. New York will do anything to keep our cotton coming. New York does not care who picks it. She leaned nearer to take us into her confidence. Maman is a lady of fashion, you know. To our house on Charter Street come all the persons of tone, all the distinguished. She sketched that house in the air for us to see, and I swear I did. Maman's Loge is the second tier of the French Opera House, the grand new one on Bourbon Street. When she is driven out the Chalmette Road to take the airs, crowds form. Delphine caught her breath at her mother's magnificence. Tall as a swaying palmetto is Maman, the belle of every ball. You have not lived until you see Maman revolving in the waltz, her shoulders bare, her throats ablaze. They cannot hold the opera. On Wednesday nights, Clemence Duval is at the ball. The balls, you know, each Wednesday at the Salle d'Orléans. Something happened then. Below the table, Calinda's hand seemed to jerk at Delphine's skirts. Delphine fell silent. A warning had passed between them. We all noticed. Well, maybe not. Noah. Delphine wavered and went on. No, Maman will not leave her Nouvelle-Orléans. Not yet. Perhaps never. Perhaps we can all be as we were. She looked away from us, seeming to hear music. That was Delphine all over. She could tell you so much that you thought you'd heard it all. Her conversation was a lacework fan that opened and closed, concealing and revealing. I didn't doubt her mother was rich and beautiful and admired. What other mother would Delphine have? What could be left to know? We'd never lingered over breakfast this long in our lives, but Delphine stirred first. Eh bien, she said with a little shrug. Well, me, I would like to examine the town. Are there shops?